Let's get started. Story number 1.
We were in our second year of college when we decided to go camping. Not the organized book a cabin sort of trip. We wanted to rough it. Just four of us, Ritesh, Varun, Akshay, and me, Samir, on our own, deep in the hills near Lonavala. It was supposed to be a bonding trip before our midterm, something memorable. And it turned out to be exactly that, just not in the way we hoped. Ritesh's uncle owned an old Maruti Gypsy, and we used that to drive to a clearing near Tamhini Ghat, a remote spot Ritesh claimed he'd camped at years before with family. According to him, it had a stream nearby, thick woods, and total isolation. It sounded perfect. We left on a Friday afternoon, spirits high despite the steady drizzle that had been coming down since morning. The monsoon had settled in hard, but we were undeterred. We had tarps, waterproof tents, raincoats, and that dumb teenage confidence that nothing could touch us. The ride was long, nearly 5 hours with traffic and washed-out roads. The last leg was just dirt path, the tires sloshing through mud and gravel until we reached a barely visible clearing surrounded by forest on 3 sides with a rocky outcrop on the 4th. The spot looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Trees loomed overhead, rain dripped in slow, steady rhythm, and the sky had already begun darkening even though it was only 5 p.m. We set up the tents, 2 of them. Me and Akshay in one, Ritesh and Varun in the other. We lit a small portable stove to boil water and made instant noodles, huddling beneath a stretched tarp. Despite the cold and wet, it was fun. Music from Varun's speaker, dumb jokes, and that warm glow of doing something a little reckless. It got dark fast. The forest swallowed sound, and beyond our lights, everything turned pitch black. There was no signal, no stars, just the endless whisper of rain and the occasional crack of branches under their own weight. Still, we stayed up until around midnight, sipping on a bottle of Old Monk and watching the mist twist between the trees. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. Not to any sound in particular, just this sudden jolt of awareness, like something had shifted in the air. Akshay was snoring softly beside me. I lay there, staring up at the tent's roof, listening. That's when I heard it. Crunch, a soft step, wet earth being disturbed just outside the tent, then another, closer. At first, I thought it was an animal, a wild boar maybe, or some stray dog, but the footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone walking carefully. Then the breathing started, shallow, uneven. Right outside the nylon wall, I held my breath. A faint scratching noise followed. Not claws, but something hard, fingernails maybe, dragging slowly along the side of the tent. From the base up to the top, I whispered, "Akshay." He stirred. "What?" "Listen." He went still. The scratching stopped. Then the tent depressed inward, just a little, as if someone had pressed a finger against it. Neither of us moved. Suddenly, from the other tent, we heard Varun yell, "Oi! Who's there?" A second later, he unzipped the flap and stormed out with his torch, waving it around. Nothing. Just the trees and the mist. We followed out, all 4 of us now, cold and shaken. Varun swore he'd seen a silhouette crouching outside their tent. It was just standing there, he said. Tall, thin, watching us. Ritesh walked the perimeter, scanning with the torch. That's when we saw them. Footprints. Barefoot. Human-shaped, but wrong. The toes were long, almost stretched. The prints too narrow. They came from the forest's edge, circled both tents, then disappeared back the same way. No other disturbances. No prints doubling back, just one trail in and out. We sat up the rest of the night, backs against the tents, torches in hand. The rain fell heavier now, making it harder to hear anything beyond our immediate circle. We kept glancing at the trees, expecting to see someone emerge at any moment. By morning, nothing had changed. No further signs. The footprints were partly washed away, and we tried to brush it off. Told ourselves maybe it was some hermit living in the forest or a prank by some hiker, anything to explain it. But none of us really believed it. We should have left then. But we didn't. Ritesh was the one who convinced us to stay another night, said it was probably just our imagination, paranoia brought on by the dark and booze. The rain had let up a little, and we hadn't come all this way just to leave early. So we stayed. That afternoon, we explored the woods nearby. The trees were old, twisted, and gnarled. Moss hung from their branches like webs. We found the stream Ritesh had talked about, swollen and muddy from the rains, but something felt off. No birds, no bugs, no sound at all except for the water. We walked further than we should have, and that's when we found it. an old stone structure barely visible beneath vines and moss, like a one-room hut or shrine half collapsed with a broken wooden door hanging off its hinges. Inside, it was empty except for a small pit in the ground filled with burnt wood and bones. Tiny bones, too small to be from animals. There were symbols carved into the walls, circular patterned spirals, things we didn't understand. None of us spoke. We backed out quietly and returned to camp. That night, we didn't drink. We sat close, not even bothering with the tent sets at first, just sitting beneath the tarp with torches and the stove for heat. The mist was thicker than before. We couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. Sometime past midnight, we heard it again. Not footsteps this time, but humming. A low, tuneless hum. It came from the forest, slow and steady, drifting closer. Then it stopped. Akshay whispered, "Do you see that?" At the tree line, barely visible through the fog, was a figure. Tall, still. We turned all our torches toward it. Nothing. The light didn't touch it, like it wasn't there at all. Then it moved. Not walked. Floated. Closer. No sound. No footprints this time. We ran into the tents, zipped them shut, and stayed inside. The humming returned, louder, almost like chanting now, a rhythm, like someone trying to mimic a lullaby without knowing how. Around 3 a.m., it stopped. Complete silence. Then laughter, childlike, giggling, right outside. We didn't move. Not until sunrise. When we finally emerged, everything was soaked. The tarps were torn down, the stove was gone. The footprints were back, but now they circled only one tent. Ours. Varun and Ritesh's tent was untouched, their flaps still closed. We called out. No answer. We unzipped the tent. They were gone. The sleeping bags were undisturbed, their shoes still inside. Phones on the floor. No sign of struggle. Just gone. We screamed their names, ran into the forest, retraced our steps to the stream, to the stone hut, but there was nothing. We spent hours searching before the fear caught up and we fled. We drove straight to the nearest police outpost and reported them missing. They searched. They found nothing. No signs of the hut, no footprints, no evidence they were ever there. Only 2 of us returned. It's been 4 years now. Akshay doesn't talk about it. He moved to Canada and cut off most of us. I heard from a friend he hasn't been the same since. He sleeps with the lights on and won't go near forests. Me? I tried to move on. But sometimes I still hear that humming. At night, in my dreams, and sometimes when I'm awake. Story the end.
Story number 2.
In the summer of 2017, when my cousin Nikhil returned to India after finishing his master's in Australia, he wanted to do something nostalgic. We'd all grown up vacationing together, so when he suggested a weekend camping trip, it felt like slipping back into childhood. It was supposed to be a quick getaway, 3 days, 2 nights, just 5 of us, me, Ravi, Nikhil, his friend Jay, our mutual friend Manu, and my younger brother Abhay. We chose a hill region in Maharashtra, somewhere between Panchgani and Wai off the usual tourist route. Manu knew of a secluded camping spot. No networks, no noise, he'd said, grinning. It was late July, peak monsoon, which meant the place would be drenched, lush, and hopefully deserted. That part was true. We reached the site after a slow, winding drive up the hills. The tar road ended miles back, and the last stretch was just a forest trail, narrow and rutted from weeks of rain. We parked the SUV near a rocky bend and hiked the last 15 minutes, lugging tents and supplies. The campsite was an open patch of land surrounded by dense trees. On one side was a slope descending into thick forest, and on the other, a moss-covered cliff wall with water trickling down its face like sweat. There was a faint path leading further into the woods, but we didn't plan to go exploring. By the time we set up camp, it had started drizzling. We stretched a large tarp between trees and made a makeshift shelter to keep dry. We didn't bother with a campfire. Everything was wet. Instead, we had a gas burner for tea and some snacks. Despite the rain and gloom, the mood was light. We played cards, shared ghost stories, laughed too hard, the kind of bonding that only happens far from cell towers. The rain didn't stop all night. It wasn't a heavy downpour, just a constant soaking drizzle. We slept in 2 tents, Abhay and I in one, the others in the second. It was hard to sleep. The sound of water tapping against the tent was hypnotic, and the cold made my bones ache. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to pee. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, careful not to trip over anything. The forest felt different at night, thicker, heavier, like it was watching. The fog made it impossible to see beyond a few meters. Just as I was about to step away from the tent, I saw something move at the edge of the trees. A flicker, barely there. I stopped, shivering, not from cold. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing. I finished quickly and got back inside, telling myself it was probably a monkey or bird disturbed by the weather. I didn't tell Abe. The next morning, everything was damp. Clothes, shoes, our bags, even the plastic boxes with food had a thin layer of moisture. We had hot maji and chai and decided to stay put for the day. Hiking in that slush was out of the question. The rain came and went, teasing us with moments of silence before picking up again. In the afternoon, while everyone else napped, I sat under the tarp reading a paperback, trying to enjoy the stillness. That's when I noticed something odd. Footprints. Not ours. These weren't shoe prints. They were barefoot, slender, adult-sized, and fresh. Mud still clung to the grass where they'd pressed down. They came from the forest, wandered near our tents, and went back the same way. I stared at them for a long time. Eventually, I called Nikhil and showed him. He knelt down, frowning. "Could be a villager," he offered. "Who walks barefoot in this rain?" "Some people do." But his voice lacked conviction. That evening, we stayed close together. The sky was darker than usual, clouds thick and low. Mist rose from the forest like steam from hot food. Jay suggested we keep a fire going. Even if it was small, it might be useful. We gathered what dry wood we could, mostly twigs from beneath dense bushes, and managed to get something burning, though it sputtered constantly from the damp. After dinner, we sat around the fire, trying to ignore the growing tension. I finally told them about what I'd seen the night before, the shape in the forest. Manu admitted he'd heard something weird while we were sleeping, like a faint whistle or call, but thought he imagined it. "Don't stories like this always start with someone ignoring a warning?" he joked. We laughed, but it felt forced. We went to sleep around midnight. At 2:17 a.m., I remember the exact time because I checked my phone. I woke up to someone whispering. Not inside the tent. Outside, it was faint, like it was being carried on the wind, but there was no wind. I nudged Abhay. "Do you hear that?" He rubbed his eyes. "What? Shh, just listen." We both held our breath. The whisper came again, a female voice, soft, almost soothing, like a lullaby or prayer in another language. Abhay sat up, his eyes wide. "Who's that?" I grabbed the flashlight, but didn't turn it on yet. We crept to the zipper, trying not to make noise. I peeled the flap open just enough to peek. There was someone standing near the tarp, barefoot. Long hair, wet and stringy, draped down her front. She wore something pale, white or light gray, but the rain made it cling to her body. She stood still, arms limp, her face turned toward the trees, not moving, not speaking. The whispering had stopped. Abhay pulled back. "Who the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. We scrambled for our shoes and rushed to the other tent, stumbling through the wet mud. Nikhil unzipped the flap, groggy and confused. Manu was already sitting up. "Someone's here," I said. "A woman." "What?" Before I could repeat myself, we heard it. A laugh, childlike, high-pitched. Not from the direction of the woman. No, it came from behind us. We all turned, flashlights swinging. Nothing. But that wasn't the worst part. When we turned back to where the woman had been, she was gone. We stayed inside one tent for the rest of the night, huddled together, torches on. Every so often, we'd hear something move outside, branches snapping, soft footsteps in mud. Once, Manu swore he heard something brushing against the nylon wall. At dawn, we emerged. There were more footprints. Bare feet, small ones, child-sized this time, leading from the woods, circling the fire pit, vanishing back toward the slope. Jay wanted to leave immediately. No one disagreed. We packed in silence. Even though it was morning, the sky stayed dull and gray. The mist was thicker than ever. It clung to our skin, our clothes, our thoughts. As we hiked back to the SUV, I kept looking over my shoulder. Halfway down, we realized something was wrong. Manu wasn't behind us. We called out. Waited. Nothing. We retraced our steps, thinking maybe he stopped to tie his shoe or take a leak, but there was no sign of him. No response. His voice, his footsteps, gone. We searched for over an hour. Finally, we went back to the SUV, thinking maybe he went ahead somehow. He hadn't. He never came back. The police got involved. They searched the forest for 2 days. Found his phone near the stream about 200 meters from the campsite. No footprints, no drag marks, no blood. Just the phone. The campsite was empty when they checked it. No sign of struggle, no evidence of another person, nothing. They ruled it a disappearance. suggested he got disoriented, wandered off, maybe fell somewhere. But we knew. You could feel it. The heaviness in the trees. The silence that pressed on your chest, the way the rain fell like it was trying to bury something. I still have dreams of that woman. Sometimes in the dream, I'm back at the campsite. She's there. Sometimes she's closer. And sometimes she speaks. Not words I know, but I understand. She's still looking. Story the end.
Story number 3.
Back in the monsoon of 2019, I went on a camping trip that I still haven't fully recovered from, even now. It was supposed to be a quick getaway from the mess of city life, just a weekend trip. I was working a 9-to-6 desk job in Pune at the time, burnt out and on edge. So when my college friend Adesh called out of the blue and said, "Let's go somewhere remote, no phones, no people, just rain and silence," I jumped at the offer. There were 4 of us. Me, Rishab, Adesh, his cousin Sagar, and a mutual friend from college, Imran. We'd all done treks and camped together during our student days, but this was our first trip in years. We wanted somewhere isolated, cheap, and far from any tourist activity. Sagar knew of a place, somewhere near the Satara region, at the edge of a forest reserve. He said there was a clearing locals used occasionally for religious ceremonies, but it was mostly abandoned. No formal campsite, no security, no network coverage. That was the appeal. We left on a Friday morning. It had been raining for days already, but the forecast promised a temporary lull that weekend. The drive was long and muddy, with roads that barely qualified as drivable, especially once we passed the last village. From there, we had to hike a little over 3 kilometers into the forest. The rain had stopped by the time we reached the site, a muddy, grassy clearing surrounded on 3 sides by dense, dark woods. On the 4th side, the hill dropped sharply into a thick valley, swallowed up by mist. The place had a kind of forgotten beauty to it. Overgrown vines, old stone slabs half buried in moss, and a strange silence even the birds didn't interrupt. We pitched 2 tents, built a crude tarp shelter using some rope and branches, and made a fire using the driest wood we could find under tree canopies. That first night was uneventful. We shared old stories, laughed a lot, cooked some rice and potatoes over the fire. The sky was pitch black, and even the stars were swallowed by mist. Around midnight, it started drizzling. We went into our tents and passed out. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., with a weird feeling. Not scared exactly, just uneasy. It was raining lightly. I could hear it tapping against the nylon tent, and in the distance something else, like whispering. At first I thought it was Adesh and Imran talking in the other tent, maybe just murmuring in their sleep. But as I lay still, the whispers seemed to grow louder, closer. Not angry or excited, just a constant strange hum, like chanting. The words didn't make sense. Some were guttural, others sing-song, like a lullaby made of static. I sat up, turned on my torch, and nudged Sagar. He was already awake. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. I thought it was a dream. The whispering stopped suddenly, as if it had been cut off mid-word. We didn't sleep again that night. The next morning was quiet, still raining, heavier now. We joked about the whispering, trying to shake off the weirdness. Sagar said maybe there were locals nearby, forest dwellers or shepherds taking shelter. But we all knew that didn't quite add up. There was no path leading further into the forest, and we hadn't seen a single soul since leaving the village. We stayed mostly under the tarp that day, waiting for the weather to calm down. Around late afternoon, Adesh and I went looking for dry firewood. We stayed within eyesight of the camp, but went toward the side of the clearing where the ground dropped off. That's when we saw something. Near the edge of the slope where the grass grew wild and ankle-deep was a set of footprints. Bare feet. Human. Deep in the mud, fresh, too fresh to have been left before the rain started. They were small, narrow, and walked from the woods straight toward the slope, and then stopped. No prints returning. Just the impression of someone walking out of the forest and vanishing at the edge. Adesh and I stared for a long time. No one said it out loud, but the thought hung between us. Did someone jump? That night, the rain got heavier. We stayed awake longer, unsure of what we were afraid of. Imran tried to lighten the mood by playing music off a half-charged Bluetooth speaker, but the fog seemed to eat the sound. Even our voices felt muffled. Around 11 p.m., Sagar stepped away to pee. He had a torch and we could see the light flickering between the trees. Then he screamed. We ran toward him, slipping in the mud. He was just standing there, eyes wide, torch pointed at nothing. She was right there, he said, panting, just standing, in the trees. Who? He couldn't answer. He just kept looking at the spot his light had pointed to. Later in the tent, he described what he saw. A woman, drenched, long black hair covering most of her face, that wearing something white. Or maybe it looked white because of the torch. He said she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared, then vanished. We didn't know what to make of it. We weren't drunk, weren't high, just cold and soaked. The logical part of my brain said he was seeing shadows, shapes in the rain. But a deeper part of me, the part that had felt that whispering the night before, believed him. At around 3 a.m., I woke up again. This time I didn't hear whispers. I heard humming, a soft, tuneless hum, a woman's voice barely above the rain. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and peeked out. She was there, standing in the center of our camp, no umbrella, no coat, just a soaking white figure, her head tilted downward like she was staring at something on the ground. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Her head twitched once, twice, like a glitch. Then she looked straight at me. Her face wasn't normal, not disfigured, just wrong. Her eyes were too large, mouth too wide. Her skin seemed stretched too tight over her cheekbones, like she was pretending to be human and doing a poor job of it. I zipped the tent shut, curled into a ball, and waited. In the morning, we all admitted we'd heard or seen something. Imran claimed he saw someone walk past the tarp, dragging something heavy behind them. Adesh said he heard breathing just outside the tent, like someone crouching low, waiting. None of us slept. We packed quickly. The forest felt alive, like it was watching us go. But the real horror didn't happen there. It happened on the way back. The trail we'd used to reach the camp was completely washed out. Trees had fallen, paths had turned to swamp. We tried to retrace our steps, but we got lost. For 6 hours, we hiked through dense forest, soaked and starving, until we stumbled onto a broken fence and followed it out. When we reached the village, an old man spotted us and waved us down. "You went to that place?" he asked. We nodded. He looked pale. "You people are lucky." We asked why. He told us a story, one we later verified with others in the village. Years ago, maybe 10 or 15, a local woman had gone missing during the monsoon. Her husband and child died trying to search for her. Some said she slipped and fell off the slope. Others whispered she had been a witch, punished by the forest spirits. Either way, ever since, people avoided that part of the woods. Hikers who ignored the warnings either got lost or came back different. Quiet, sick, haunted. We never went back, and I never camped in the rain again. Even now, years later, when the monsoon begins and the sky turns that dull gray, I find myself looking out windows more carefully, listening for humming, wondering if I brought something back with me. Story the end.
Story number 4.
It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway. My friends and I had planned it for weeks, a camping trip to the dense, secluded woods about 2 hours from our town. We had been so excited. Nature, good company, and a break from everything. No phone signal, no distractions, just the forest, campfire, and the stars. But as with everything in life, things don't always go according to plan. We arrived on Friday evening, the sky cloudy and the air thick with humidity. The drive had been a bit long, and we were all eager to set up camp. The woods were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. The trees were massive, their trunks covered in thick moss, and the ground was uneven and damp from the earlier rain. The site we had picked was a clearing near a small stream, and there was an old fire ring made of rocks, just perfect for the campfire. We pitched our tents quickly, laughing and joking as we worked. It was fun, like it always is when you're with friends in the wild. As dusk began to fall, the temperature dropped and the humidity increased. The clouds rolled in heavier, and a light drizzle started to fall. We huddled around the fire, its warmth contrasting with the cool air. The flames danced and crackled, casting long shadows across our faces. We spent the evening telling stories, the kind that make you laugh at first, but then, as the fire starts to fade and the shadows grow longer, they begin to feel a bit too real. We eventually ran out of things to say, and the conversation turned to ghosts and creepy encounters, as it always does when you're out in the woods. My friend Kyle, always the skeptic, rolled his eyes when someone mentioned the paranormal. "There's no such thing as ghosts," he said, tossing another log on the fire. "It's just the wind or the trees making noises." "Yeah, tell that to the people who've had experiences," Sarah shot back, clearly not wanting to let the conversation die. "My grandmother swears she saw a ghost in her old house." "Oh, I'm sure she did. Probably just an old creaky floorboard," Kyle said dismissively, but there was a slight edge in his voice. Even he, a staunch non-believer, couldn't completely hide his discomfort. I laughed, but deep down, the thought of ghosts and spirits unsettled me more than I liked to admit. I hadn't experienced anything myself, but I'd heard stories from people I trusted. Strange things that didn't make sense, things that couldn't be explained by logic alone. The wind howled softly through the trees, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I didn't want to admit it, but the thought of something watching us out there in the dark, beyond the firelight, made my skin crawl. As the night wore on, the rain picked up, turning into a steady downpour. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, and the fire crackled as the flames began to die down. We huddled closer together, talking in hushed tones, our faces illuminated by the flickering light. The forest around us was completely black, the trees towering like dark giants that seemed to close in on us. Around midnight, the rain stopped suddenly. The forest went completely still, and for a moment I thought I heard something, a distant sound, like footsteps crunching through the wet leaves. I looked around, but no one seemed to notice. Kyle was still talking, his voice loud and confident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence that followed the rain felt too heavy, like the world was holding its breath. After a while, we decided to turn in for the night. The tents were set up in a semicircle around the fire, and as we crawled into our sleeping bags, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. It wasn't the usual fear of the dark, but something else, a deep primal sense that we weren't alone out there. I lay in my tent, listening to the sounds of the forest. The rain had started up again, this time softer, more of a drizzle than a downpour. The wind had picked up too, rustling the leaves and making the trees creak. I tried to sleep, but every little noise seemed to send my heart racing. The sound of a branch cracking, the rustle of the leaves, the faintest footsteps in the distance. It all felt too real, too close. I told myself it was just the wind, just my imagination running wild, but the feeling persisted. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I woke up to a strange sound. At first, I thought it was just the rain or the wind, but it was different. It was closer now, and there was something unnerving about it. I listened more closely, my heart thumping in my chest. It was the unmistakable sound of something moving through the underbrush, something large. My breath caught in my throat as the sound grew louder, closer. I froze, staring at the thin fabric of my tent, willing it to be the wind or an animal. But the sound was too deliberate, too purposeful. And then it stopped. There was a long stretch of silence, and for a brief moment I thought maybe it had just been my imagination. But then I heard a faint whisper, a voice, barely audible, but unmistakably clear. It wasn't one of my friends. It wasn't Kyle or Sarah or anyone. The voice was strange, distant, like it was coming from far away or from deep in the woods. It murmured something I couldn't understand, a language I didn't recognize. It was low, guttural, and cold. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I held my breath, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. The whisper grew louder, closer, until it was right outside my tent. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the zipper to open my tent. I had to see what it was. I had to. But the zipper wouldn't budge. Panic flooded me as I yanked at it again, and that's when the whispering stopped. The forest went dead quiet again. I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, listening intently, but there was nothing. No movement, no sounds. Just the rain, now a gentle patter against the fabric of my tent. My breathing was loud in my ears, my heart still racing as I tried to calm myself down. Maybe I had imagined it, I thought. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But the feeling of being watched never left. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just lay there, wide-eyed and frozen, listening to every noise around me, my mind racing with thoughts of what could have been out there in the woods. The next morning, when the sun finally rose and the rain had stopped, I crawled out of my tent. exhausted and shaken. The others were already awake, sitting around the remnants of the campfire, which was now little more than a pile of wet ashes. Kyle was the first to notice me. "Hey, you look like you didn't get much sleep," he said with a grin. I didn't," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Did anyone else hear anything weird last night?" "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, looking at me curiously. "The whispering," I said, my voice low. "In the woods. It was like a voice, but it wasn't one of us." They all stared at me, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. "What do you mean, like a voice? What did it say?" Kyle asked, his tone more serious than I had ever heard it. "I don't know. I couldn't understand it, but it was close," I said, my voice trailing off as I looked around the clearing. The woods seemed normal in the daylight, but there was something off about it, like the trees were closing in again. None of them had heard anything. They all assured me it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been out there with us. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one who had felt it. As we packed up camp, I noticed something strange. Our tents, which had been perfectly set up the night before, were now all facing the same direction. They hadn't been that way when we went to bed, and there were footprints in the mud, large, deep prints, like someone had been walking around our campsite while we slept. But none of us had heard anything, and no one had seen anyone. We left the woods that morning, none of us speaking much. We were all lost in our thoughts, the strange events of the night hanging over us like a thick fog. No one mentioned ghosts or spirits again. We all just wanted to get out of there. I haven't been back to those woods since, and I'm not sure I ever will. There's something out there, something that doesn't belong, and I'm convinced it was watching us that night. The whispering, the footsteps, the feeling of being followed, I can still hear it in my mind. I'll never forget the fear I felt, knowing that something out there in the dark had been close enough to touch, but I never saw it. Story, the end.
Story number 5.
It rained the entire drive up the mountain. Not the soft, relaxing kind of rain, either. It was relentless, hammering the windshield like it had a grudge. The wipers barely keeping up as we wound along the slippery, narrow road. But that didn't stop us. We'd been planning this trip for weeks, just me, Josh, Tyler, and Marcus. 4 guys looking to get away from city noise, clear our heads, unplug for a weekend. The rain, we thought, would just add to the adventure. We arrived later than expected. It was nearly dusk when we reached the trailhead, the sky a dull, leaden gray. We grabbed our gear, shouldered our packs, and started the 1.5-mile hike to the clearing by the lake. The rain hadn't let up, soaking through our jackets despite the waterproofing. My boots squelched with every step, and the trail was more mud than dirt, but we pushed on, fueled by that stubborn determination you get when you've already committed to something. By the time we made it to the clearing, it was nearly dark. We set up camp as quickly as we could. 2 tents, a blue tarp slung between trees for cover, a damp bundle of firewood we hoped would dry out enough to burn. The lake was hidden behind a wall of fog, the surface barely visible like a ghost under a sheet. Josh was the first to say it. "This place feels weird." Tyler laughed. "Yeah, because it's pissing rain and we're soaked." "No," Josh insisted. "Not just the rain. Something else. It's too quiet." He wasn't wrong. The forest had that heavy stillness to it, like it was holding its breath. No birds, no bugs, not even the wind through the trees. Just the constant, steady whisper of the rain and our own breathing. We got a fire going, miraculously. Marcus worked on it like his life depended on it, and somehow managed to coax a few stubborn flames out of the soaked wood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to warm our hands. We heated up cans of soup and passed around a flask of whiskey until our bones stopped shaking. The rain began to lighten, but the fog didn't lift. It just sat there, thick and unmoving, smothering the campsite like cotton. It wasn't long before the conversation shifted, as it always does when you're out in the woods, tired, and just drunk enough. "You guys ever hear about that couple that disappeared around here?" Marcus asked, poking at the fire with a stick. Josh looked up. "What couple?" "Couple from back in the 90s. Hikers. They came out here, never came back. Search and rescue found their tent, their gear, everything except them. No blood, no sign of a struggle. Just gone." "That's just some backwoods urban legend," I said. Every forest has one. Except this one's real, Marcus replied, his voice low. My uncle's a sheriff. He told me about it years ago, said he was part of the search party. He's never gone camping since. That's comforting, Tyler muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. We laughed it off, but the mood had shifted. Even the fire seemed to flicker a little more erratically after that. I felt it too. That strange feeling, like we weren't really alone. Like the forest was watching us. Around 11, we decided to call it a night. The rain had started again, lighter now, more of a mist than a downpour, but enough to make everything damp again. We doused the fire, crawled into our tents and zipped ourselves in. I shared a tent with Josh, while Marcus and Tyler took the other. I lay there for a long time listening, not to anything in particular, but to the absence of noise. No frogs, no insects, not even the breeze. Just that soft, wet hiss of rain against nylon. Then I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind, a long, low sound that rose and fell, almost like a hum. But then it shifted, became more rhythmic, a kind of chanting. Faint. Far off, but getting closer. I sat up, heart suddenly racing. "Josh," I whispered. He was already awake. "You hear that?" "Yeah." We unzipped the tent as quietly as we could. The fire was long dead, the camp cloaked in fog and darkness. But the sound, the chanting, was clearer now. Still distant, but definitely human. A voice, maybe more than one, repeating something over and over. The words were impossible to make out, like they were in another language or being swallowed by the trees. "Maybe it's other campers?" Josh said, though he didn't sound convinced. "There's no one else out here," I said. "We're the only ones who signed the log at the trailhead." The chanting stopped. For a moment there was just silence again. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, squelching in the wet ground. Not coming down the trail, but from the forest behind our tents. We both ducked back inside, zipped the flap, and sat in the dark. I could feel Josh trembling beside me, and my own hands were slick with sweat despite the cold. The footsteps stopped just outside our tent. Whoever it was didn't say anything, didn't knock or speak, just stood there. I held my breath, listening. The rain was louder now, a steady patter on the nylon, but I could still hear the breathing, low. Raspy, not close enough to be touching the tent, but no more than a foot away. Then nothing. No footsteps leaving, no rustling, just gone. I don't know how long we sat there. Time didn't feel real anymore. Eventually, I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was waking up to gray light filtering through the tent fabric. We stepped outside to find the others already up. Tyler looked pale. Marcus was pacing. "You guys heard that last night, right?" Marcus asked. "The voices?" Josh and I nodded. "There were footprints," Tyler said, pointing toward the edge of the clearing. "Big ones. I tried to take a picture, but the fog messed it up." We went to look, and sure enough, there they were. Deep impressions in the mud, spaced like someone had been walking slowly. Bare feet. No shoes, no tread marks. Just long, wide feet with long toes like fingers. They led from the forest to the tents and stopped. Just stopped. Not turned around. Not doubled back. Just ended. That was enough for us. We packed up in record time, stuffing our tents and gear into our packs without much care. We didn't speak. We didn't even eat. We just wanted to leave. As we hiked back down the trail, the fog began to lift. The forest felt lighter somehow, less oppressive, like whatever had been there the night before was gone. But none of us could shake the feeling that we were being watched. I caught Josh glancing over his shoulder more than once. I did the same. We didn't talk about it on the drive home. In fact, we didn't really talk about it at all for months. Not until Tyler finally broke the silence one night while we were all hanging out at his place. "I looked up the area," he said. "There have been disappearances going back decades. Same pattern. Tents left behind. No sign of struggle. No bodies." "Could be animals," Marcus offered weakly. "Animals don't chant," I said. Josh just shook his head. "I don't know what that was out there, but I'll never go back." None of us will. Sometimes when it rains at night, I still hear it, that distant, rhythmic chant just beneath the sound of the downpour. I tell myself it's my imagination, that it's just a memory, but I keep my curtains closed and I don't go to the woods anymore. Story the end.
Story number 6.
It started as a simple getaway. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I'd just gone through a rough breakup and work had been grinding me down for months. I needed out. So when Evan, my old college friend, suggested a weekend camping trip, I jumped at the idea. He pitched it as a chance to disconnect, breathe some mountain air, sit by a fire, and forget the world. He brought his girlfriend Lauren, and her best friend Harper tagged along too. 4 of us, 2 tents, and a long drive into the forest. It felt right. The place Evan picked was tucked away near a small lake in Washington state, a few miles off any main road, buried deep in pine woods that felt endless. We arrived late Friday afternoon, and as we parked the car and started to unload gear, the sky was already sulking. Thick gray clouds rolled above the treetops. Rain was coming. We didn't care. We were young, restless, and naively sure that nature was something we could just laugh off. It started drizzling before we even finished setting up the tents. The rain wasn't heavy at first, but steady, like it was trying to wear us down over time. We got the fire going and huddled around it beneath a large tarp strung between trees. Dinner was simple. Hot dogs, canned chili, whiskey. We talked for hours, the way people do when they haven't seen each other in years. Stories from college, relationships, career horror stories. I remember laughing a lot that first night, despite the dampness and the cold slowly settling in. It must have been close to midnight when we finally decided to call it a night. The rain hadn't stopped. In fact, it had gotten heavier. The sound of it against the tarp was deafening. I shared a tent with Evan, while Lauren and Harper had the other one. We crawled into our sleeping bags and lay there in the dark, listening to the rain and the occasional gust of wind. I was just starting to drift off when I heard something. It was faint, soft, wet footsteps, like someone walking barefoot across the soaked forest floor. I held my breath, straining to hear through the rain. Then a voice. A woman's voice. It was low, muffled, but unmistakable. I thought at first it must have been Lauren or Harper. Maybe one of them went outside to use the bathroom. But something about it wasn't right. The voice was too calm, too slow, like someone reciting something under their breath. I couldn't make out the words. They didn't sound English. I nudged Evan. "Hey, do you hear that?" He stirred. "What?" "Someone's out there. Talking." He turned on his side, annoyed. "It's probably Harper. Go back to sleep." I didn't argue. Maybe he was right. The voice stopped after a minute. The footsteps didn't. They circled the tent, once, twice. I stayed still, holding my breath until the sounds faded into the rain. The next morning, I asked the girls if either of them had gotten up during the night. They both said no. They hadn't even woken up. Lauren looked uneasy when I told her about the voice. Harper brushed it off, said maybe I dreamt it, but I hadn't. We spent the day hiking. It rained off and on, but never completely stopped. We were soaked the entire time. Still, the views were stunning. The mist hanging low over the trees, the lake like glass. Evan and I climbed a ridge that overlooked the water, and he joked about how the place looked like the perfect setting for a horror movie. I laughed, but the truth was, I was already on edge. Something about the forest felt off, too quiet, like the rain was hiding something just out of reach. That night, the firewood was too wet to catch. We sat under the tarp in the dim glow of a single lantern, playing cards and sipping from a bottle of bourbon. Harper said she had a weird headache and turned in early. Lauren followed not long after. That left Evan and me. "What do you think about this place?" I asked him. He shrugged. "It's peaceful, kind of creepy, sure, but I like that." "Yeah, but something feels wrong, doesn't it?" He didn't answer at first, and he looked out toward the trees and said, Last night, I thought I saw someone standing out there. That sent a chill down my spine. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks, the fog, the rain, whatever. But it felt real, like someone was watching us." We sat in silence after that, listening. The woods didn't make a sound. That night, it was my turn to wake up first, not to a voice, but to the tent shaking, lightly, rhythmically, like something was pushing against it from the outside. I froze. Evan was still asleep. I could see his silhouette in the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the nylon. Then the pushing stopped. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and unzipped the tent. Nothing. The forest was dense with fog, thick as smoke. I could barely see a few feet ahead. The rain was lighter now, more of a mist, but the air was heavy. Cold. I scanned the area slowly, the flashlight beam cutting through the white haze. And then I saw her. A woman. Barefoot. Soaking wet. Wearing what looked like a white hospital gown. She was standing just beyond the edge of our camp, perfectly still, her face obscured by wet, black hair hanging down like curtains. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then slowly she turned her head, not the way a person turns, but stiffly, like something clicking into place. I bolted back inside the tent, zipped it shut, and shook Evan awake. "There's someone out there," I whispered. He blinked. "What?" "A woman. Just standing there." "I saw her," he groaned. "Come on, man. Not funny." "I'm not joking." He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and finally relented. We both got out and circled the camp, but the fog had thickened, and there was no trace of anyone. No footprints, no sounds. "I swear to God, Evan," I said, "I saw her." He didn't say anything, but I could tell by the way he kept glancing into the trees that he believed me. The next morning, Harper was gone. Her sleeping bag was there, her boots, her backpack, but she wasn't. Lauren panicked. We all did. We searched every inch of the camp, called her name until our throats were raw. Nothing. No signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away. Just gone. We radioed for help using the emergency beacon Evan had brought. A ranger responded and said they'd send a team, but it would take a few hours. So we waited. Scared, cold, and helpless. Then we heard it, Harper's voice. It came from the woods, distant, faint, calling our names. Lauren cried. She ran toward it, but Evan grabbed her and held her back. "That's not her," he said. "That's not her." We stood there, listening. The voice repeated again and again. Then it changed. Started saying things Harper couldn't have known, things none of us had said out loud. Secrets, regrets, things buried deep. We didn't wait for the Rangers after that. We packed what we could and ran. The voice followed us all the way down the trail. It didn't sound like Harper anymore. It sounded like someone else. Something else. We made it to the ranger station and told them everything. They searched the area for days, brought in dogs, helicopters, found nothing. No signs, no body, no footprints, just the forest and the rain. That was 5 years ago. I haven't been camping since. None of us have. Lauren still has nightmares. Evan doesn't talk about it. He moved to Arizona, far from any forests. Sometimes when I'm alone and it's raining at night, I think I hear her voice again. Faint, just outside the window, calling my name, and I don't dare look. Story the end.
Story number 7.
The weekend we went camping in Tillamook State Forest was supposed to be a last hurrah before Gavin left for Oregon State. It was me, him, his younger cousin Ryan, and our mutual friend Denise. We had all grown up in Portland together and had talked about doing a real backwoods camping trip before we all went separate ways. Denise and I were staying local for college, but Gavin was moving out of state. So we picked a weekend in mid-September, packed our gear, and drove into the heart of the forest. The forecast said rain, but it didn't start until we'd already been on the trail for a while. The spot Gavin had in mind was a little-known clearing near a creek about 4 miles in, off the main trail. It was secluded and, according to him, perfect. We got there around late afternoon, right as the first drops began falling. It didn't seem like a big deal. We'd brought tarps and our tents were decent. Rain was part of the adventure. By the time camp was set, the drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. Everything smelled like wet pine and earth. It wasn't cold exactly, but that dampness soaked into your bones. We rigged a tarp over the fire pit and managed to get a small fire going. It smoked a lot, but it gave us something to huddle around. We roasted hot dogs, shared a bottle of cheap whiskey, and talked about what we wanted life to look like in 5 years. Gavin said he wanted to work with wildlife, become a park ranger or something. Denise wanted to write a book. Ryan was only 16 and didn't say much, just listened. When it got too wet to sit around, we retreated to our tents. Denise and I shared one, Gavin and Ryan the other. I lay there listening to the rain pound the nylon, the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. Denise fell asleep quickly, but I stayed up. Something about the quiet beyond the rain felt wrong, like the forest was holding its breath. Then I heard it, crunching leaves, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the woods behind our tent. I froze. They stopped a few feet from the tent wall. I thought maybe Gavin or Ryan had gotten up, but I didn't hear a zipper or any voices, just silence, then more crunching, this time moving around our tent. I held my breath. Whoever it was wasn't using a flashlight, just walking, slowly, circling us. Then it stopped again, right outside the entrance. I whispered, "Gavin?" No answer. The sound faded after that. Just the rain again. I didn't wake Denise. I didn't move. I just lay there, heart pounding, until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next morning, I told the others what I'd heard. Gavin shrugged it off. Could have been an animal. No animal walks like that, I said. It was pacing. Ryan looked pale. He said he'd woken up in the night too and heard someone whispering from the woods, thought he imagined it. We all brushed it off, even me, though it sat heavy in my gut. We were in the middle of nowhere. Maybe we'd gotten inside our own heads. That afternoon, the rain stopped for a while. We hiked upstream to find a deeper spot in the creek where we could wash off and relax. The forest was gorgeous after the rain, glistening, thick with fog in the distance. Denise picked some wildflowers. Ryan kept glancing over his shoulder. I tried not to think about the night before. We got back to camp around 5. The sky was already darkening, more clouds rolling in. The second we lit the fire, the rain started again. Heavier this time. We ate fast and retreated back to the tents. I brought a flashlight into my sleeping bag and kept it on, pointing at the tent ceiling. Denise was just about asleep when I heard it again. Footsteps. Softer than before, like someone trying not to be heard. I turned off the flashlight and sat up. The steps moved closer to our tent, then stopped. Then a knock. Not loud, just 2 quick taps against the nylon. Denise sat up, wide-eyed. Was that? Yeah. We both froze. Then came the whisper. It was soft, like breath through leaves. I couldn't make out the words. It was so close it could have been someone crouching right outside. Then I realized it wasn't just one voice, it was 2. The whispers grew louder, still unintelligible. Faster now, urgent. Denise grabbed my hand. I unzipped the tent just a few inches and shone the flashlight outside. Nothing. The woods were black and still. We didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, we decided to cut the trip short. None of us said it directly, but we were all spooked. Ryan had dark circles under his eyes. Gavin tried to play it cool, but packed faster than any of us. As we started the hike back, the rain picked up again, harder than before. Visibility dropped fast. Within an hour, the trail was thick with mud and fog settled around us like smoke. It got so quiet, no birds, no wind, just rain and the sound of our boots sinking into the wet earth. About 2 miles in, Ryan stopped. Do you guys see that? He pointed toward the trees. I squinted. There was a figure standing about 30 feet off the trail, barefoot, wearing white, soaked head to toe. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell their head was cocked to one side like a question. Gavin stepped forward, calling out, "Hello? You okay?" No response. The figure didn't move. We stood there for what felt like minutes, waiting for something to happen. Then Denise whispered, "They're barefoot," as if that explained everything. We turned and started walking again, faster this time. I looked back once. The figure was still there, unmoving. We didn't stop again until we reached the car. Soaked, muddy, silent. On the drive back, we didn't speak. Not about what we saw, not about the whispers. We just played music quietly and tried to pretend we hadn't gone into that forest at all. But 2 nights later, Ryan went missing. His mom called me first, thinking maybe he'd come to my place. He hadn't. None of us had seen him since the trip. His phone was found in his room, plugged in and untouched. His shoes were gone, so was a raincoat. The police searched the woods. Nothing. He just vanished. I tried to tell them what we saw, the whispers, the barefoot figure. But they looked at me like I was losing it. Gavin refused to say anything. Denise cried and said we made it up in our heads. I don't think we did. Weeks passed, then months. Ryan's never been found. But once in late October, I drove out to the trailhead alone. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe closure, maybe guilt. I parked, walked just 20 feet into the woods and stood there. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard the footsteps. Soft. Wet. Coming up behind me, I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand. No one was there, but the footprints were, barefoot, in the mud, leading toward the forest. Then just stopping, like the night before. Like someone had stepped into the earth itself. I haven't been back since. Sometimes when it rains, I still hear the whispers in my dreams. I wake up sweating, heart racing, always the same words repeating, low, fast, unintelligible, like they're trying to speak through the sound of the storm. But I never understand them. I just know they're not gone. They're waiting. Story the end.
Story number 8.
It was a last-minute trip. The kind where no one really plans much and everything comes together in a rush of group texts and scrambled grocery store runs. There were 6 of us, 3 couples, and we wanted one more weekend of nature before winter really rolled in. The weather forecast warned about light showers, maybe heavier in the early hours, but none of us took it seriously. We figured the rain would be manageable and maybe even add a little atmosphere. Besides, the spot we had in mind was one we'd been to before, off a small dirt road past the lake, about a 2-hour drive from town. It was secluded, surrounded by dense forest, and just far enough off the map to feel like a true escape. We arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was already dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows over the wet, leaf-covered trail. Everything smelled of damp earth, pine, and smoke. It was peaceful, quiet, and the only sounds were our boots against the muddy ground and the occasional burst of laughter when someone slipped or dropped something. We set up camp quickly, erecting 3 tents in a loose triangle around a stone fire pit we had built on our last trip here. It started raining just after we got the fire going. At first, it was light and steady, almost relaxing. We threw a tarp over the fire and huddled underneath, passing around a bottle of whiskey and telling the same stories we always told. There was something comforting about it, that sense of shared memory and place. We roasted hot dogs on sticks, listened to music off a waterproof speaker, and let the night slip by. The first strange thing happened just after midnight. The fire was dying down, and the rain had gotten heavier, thudding against the tarps and tents in thick, wet sheets. We were all buzzed and ready to crash when Jess, who's always been a little more observant than the rest of us, suddenly asked, "Did you hear that?" We paused. The rain had dulled most of the outside noise, but it wasn't silent. There was a soft, rhythmic sound coming from the woods beyond the circle of firelight, like someone walking. But the steps were off. They didn't sound natural. They were slow, unsteady, dragging almost, like someone moving barefoot through wet leaves, not trying to be quiet but not rushing either. "What the hell is that?" Matt asked. He stood up, squinting into the trees. "Maybe a deer?" "No," Jess said firmly. "That's not how a deer moves." We all listened harder. The sound came closer, circling just outside the light. Then it stopped. Dead silence. The 6 of us looked at each other and no one spoke. Then, from behind my tent, there came a single knock. Not a tree branch, not thunder, but a clear, deliberate knock. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. "Okay, that's not funny," Lisa said. Her voice was shaky. "No one's behind your tent," I said. "We're all here." Another knock came, closer this time, then footsteps, squelching, slow, and very much human. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the trees, but there was nothing, just trunks and shadows and rain dripping through the branches. "We should go inside the tents," Rachel whispered. "Just stay in for the night." We did. None of us said much after that. The fire had nearly died out anyway, and the downpour made conversation difficult. I crawled into the tent I shared with Lisa and zipped it up. It was damp, smelled of plastic and wet socks, and every creak of the trees outside made me flinch. Lisa was quiet. I could tell she was awake by the way she kept shifting, trying to get comfortable on the cold ground. At some point, I drifted off. I don't know what woke me up. Maybe it was the sudden silence, rain tapering off to nothing, or maybe it was something else. But my eyes snapped open and I was instantly alert. The tent was pitch black. No moonlight, no movement, just this heavy, still air. I listened. Then I heard it, breathing. At first, I thought it was Lisa, but she was still and her breaths were shallow and even. This was different. It was coming from outside the tent. Deep, wet breathing, right by the flap. Then came a voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't yelling, just a low, deliberate voice like someone speaking directly into the fabric of the tent. "You left the door open." I froze. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Lisa stirred beside me. "What?" she mumbled. I clamped my hand over her mouth. I didn't know why, I just knew without understanding it that we needed to be silent. After a minute, the breathing stopped. Then there were footsteps again, walking slowly away through the mud and leaves. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I told the others. No one laughed. Jess looked pale. Matt said he thought he heard something too around the same time, like someone was running a hand across the outside of his tent. Rachel had a dream, she said, but it didn't feel like a dream. She said she saw a man standing just outside, staring in through the mesh. His face was pale, bloated, and waterlogged, like he had been pulled from a river. We decided not to stay another night. As we packed, I noticed something. Around our campsite in the wet mud, there were footprints, not from boots, barefoot. Dozens of them. Human, bare feet. Some small, some large, all around our tents, circling them, and all facing inward. Jess found something by the fire pit. A small wooden carving, roughly shaped like a man with no face, arms outstretched. It was soaked and smelled of rot. She picked it up with a stick and tossed it into the fire, but the flames didn't catch. It just smoldered and hissed until she stomped it out. We hiked out without talking much. The rain had picked up again and everything felt off. Heavier. The forest seemed to watch us, quiet and brooding, the way it does when something isn't right. That night after we got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. How it said, "You left the door open." We hadn't left any tent unzipped. That much I remembered clearly. But it didn't feel like it was talking about the tent. A week later, Matt called me. He sounded rattled, said Rachel wasn't sleeping, that she kept waking up screaming, convinced someone was inside their apartment. She'd started sleepwalking, something she'd never done before. And once he found her standing in their living room, soaking wet, muttering the same phrase over and over, "Let him in, let him in, let him in." Jess sent me a photo a few days after that. It was from her phone, taken the night we went camping. A picture of the group around the fire. We all looked normal, laughing, smiling, bundled in coats and flannel, but there was someone else in the picture, in the background, barely visible, just at the edge of the light. A man, standing between two trees. Naked, pale, his arms outstretched. We hadn't seen him that night. No one noticed him when the photo was taken, but he was there. We tried to forget. Honestly, we did. None of us wanted to believe we'd brought something back with us. But things kept happening. Lisa started having nosebleeds. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. and always after, she'd hear knocking at the window, even on the nights when it didn't rain. I moved out for a while, stayed with my brother. It didn't help. I'd wake up to wet footprints in the kitchen, leading from the back door to my bedroom. I finally went back to the campsite. I don't know what I was looking for. Closure, maybe. Answers. The place was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was dead quiet, like everything was holding its breath. The fire pit was gone, not destroyed. Gone. The stones were missing. The ground where it had been was smooth, almost freshly packed, like it had never been there. But I found something nearby. Hanging from a branch just above eye level was another wooden carving, just like the one Jess had burned. Faceless, arms outstretched, and carved into its chest was a symbol. A circle with 3 lines crossing through it. I didn't touch it. I ran. That was 6 months ago. We don't talk about it anymore. Jess moved to another city. Matt and Rachel broke up. Lisa and I are still together, but it's like something is always hanging between us now. Like something followed us home. Some nights I still hear the breathing, I still hear the knock, and once, just once, I woke up to find the tent set up in our living room. Not a tent like ours, an old canvas thing, torn and dripping wet. There was mud everywhere. Lisa didn't remember setting it up. She didn't remember anything at all. Inside the tent, there was a puddle, just standing water, still and black. I haven't touched it. It's still there. I don't know what we let in that night, but it's not leaving. Story the end.